Small Business Administration and the Department of Defense as a veterans liaison. My title was the Veterans Business Outreach Coordinator, and my area of responsibility was the City of New York and the State of New Jersey. I facilitated the opening or education of veterans in areas of starting business. What I learned and what I was echoed to me by a lot of veterans throughout the community was that the space was very fragmented and it was confusing. So there was a lot of misinformation that was being circulated. So through our efforts, we managed to put together a network of veteran-centric organizations to serve veterans. What we're missing at this point is the boots on the ground, so to speak, which are the ones that are interfacing with the veterans on a regular basis, which is why we are here to propose a veterans task force in Brooklyn, which is going to be a combination or efforts of the community boards. So this presentation that I have to show for you tonight, or we have to show to you tonight, is going to outline what this task force is going to look like and our goals and how we can work with each other to assist our veterans. And as you know, Veterans Day is coming up next week. So I hope that we're all in the patriotic mood. And, you know, yesterday was election day. So I hope that everyone exercised their right to vote. So without any further ado, I will get into the presentation. Okay. Okay. So the purpose of the Brooklyn Task Force is to improve veteran experiences. And this is initiated by the Veterans Action Group of Buffalo Soldiers of America. The purpose is to perform an in-depth analysis of the issues facing inner city veterans. So we do know that the space is very fragmented, and we're trying to find the best approach that is going to meet the needs of the veterans without further taxing the communities themselves. So we're trying to propose a win-win situation where not only can we facilitate the services that we provide on a daily basis, but do it in a more efficient manner. Our objectives are, we're going to create reactionary objectives, which are whatever we discover during our analysis, we're going to propose solutions on a customized basis because we found through our approach that this was the best way. We're going to do outreach. If we have the support of the community boards, we can be more aggressive because we have the bodies that is going to help us to provide the support that we need for the veterans. And especially during this whole COVID environment, a lot of the issues that veterans were facing, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate, were further exacerbated due to this whole shutdown. So a lot of issues that veterans suffered on a regular basis wasn't a typical issue that someone would face. So when you couple that with the environment that we have today in COVID-19, you can see that this is an extreme peril for a lot of veterans. So we want to make sure that we have the right plan in place, which is why we want to do planning objectives and set out long-term goals so that we can get the right outcomes. And not only that, because we know that there's a disconnect between how we interact with veterans, we want to do training and provide training to the task force so that they know how to interact with veterans, how to identify them, how to identify the issues, and how to properly integrate them into the task force resources. We're going to do stakeholder updates to make sure that everyone that's involved is aware and keep everything transparent. So we're going to have a few areas of concentration, which is some of the areas that pose the greatest threat, especially now that the weather is changing. Home ownership and housing is a big issue for veterans. A lot of times, folks don't know how to identify veterans, and so they're not able to get access to the resources and benefits that was afforded to them by their service. Another issue is with homelessness, especially for veterans that did not serve a long stint in the military, who are not familiar with the rigors and responsibilities of home ownership, often find themselves at the mercy of society when they come back. So they end up, falling into bad habits, getting into, bad financial situations, and homelessness is a result. So we want to attack that in a very aggressive manner, especially given the environment, because that not only poses a threat to the veteran, but it also poses a threat to our society at large. What we also want to do is peer-based reintegration. So as I mentioned earlier, we as veterans can easily identify other veterans, but it's also an easier transition to make the interface and also to get them to understand that this is somebody that knows where they're coming from. Beyond that, we're going to do the support group. And this is where the task force comes in. So this is where the community boards that have the veteran committees will be able to not only bolster them, but the ones that don't will be able to add them to their ranks and also improve their visibility. And as far as other medical issues that veterans face, such as mental and other psychological issues, we'll be able to treat those. Physical disabilities, those are another issues that veterans have, and a lot of times those disabilities aren't as obvious. And as we know, a lot of times folks that are on the margins of society are often overlooked because folks cannot see their physical disabilities. And also, one of the great advantages to this task force is that we can tap into the disciplines of all the different veteran resources and make them available to the veterans. And so this is the core and basic idea of what the task force is going to be. So we want to foster a relationship with the community boards. Not only do we want to do that, but we want to use them as a conduit through which we spread the correct information. We know that misinformation is a big detriment to us, and that happens even more frequently in the veteran community. So we want to make sure that they are abreast of what's happening and coming down the pipeline, and also making sure that they are being interfaced with the correct organizations. So the support that we're providing is not only for the veterans themselves, but also for their families. Now, this can extend to active members of the military, but we are focusing on veterans that have separated. But we're not going to refuse any service member that comes for service. We're going to form Veterans Affairs committees and subcommittees that do not have one. We're going to assist in the information that we're going to provide to the committee so that it's uniform. And where there is no committees to share those information, we're going to facilitate those. Okay. So we also want to invite the community boards to provide their feedback, to know what they're currently doing, to find out if there's any best practices that we can adopt, and also in turn foster a mutual sharing of information. We also want to streamline our services because we found that there's a lot of redundancies within the agencies and organizations that can be streamlined to provide or free up more resources to be provided to the veterans. So our long-term goals. are to provide intergenerational interaction and mentoring. And this is something that's missing in our society. That happens in a lot of other countries, but it doesn't happen as much in the US. And we hope to adopt this and make this very commonplace. And also a veteran to community mentoring, having the veterans go out into the community and making themselves visible so that the communities are aware of who they are and understand how to interact with them. So we also want to institute a track-in system, so to speak, to know for sure that the veterans are receiving the services that they need. So when we do interface with them, we will do intake and understand what their needs are. And the follow-through presents a challenge for them, especially those that have other underlying conditions. So we want to have a way of tracking them to make sure that they are getting the assistance that they need, and having the bodies in the community boards that are going to help to take the load off of the organizations, we believe is going to be the best solution to help our veterans. Okay, so as far as we're just starting out this task force, and the advisors that we have currently right now are Christopher James, Mr. Farrell, Herbert Sweat, Mr. Smythe, and myself. So we're also looking to integrate more folks into the task force. So we're looking for participants. So this presentation is to introduce this and hopefully facilitate a dialogue where we can we're going to tap into resources such as the local, state, and federal resources so that we can streamline those resources to the veterans. Because based on our research, the fragmented nature of the veteran community and the services that they need, it's not feasible to have dedicated services for any specific set of veterans in any locality. So we're trying to integrate the resources that may not be located locally, but are still accessible to the veterans. So this network is trying to provide that resource for them so that they have affordable or free services, and the agencies that are providing the services do not have to do anything extra to reach the veterans that they're being funded to support.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
So yes, I know we may be pressed for time, so I can wrap up. And I know that Christopher has some we'll do a Q&A for anyone that has any questions. So that is my presentation for tonight. Thank you so much for having us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thank you so much. With that being said, is there any questions for our presenters this evening from the board? You can raise your hand or drop it in the chat. Yep.
Honor, a simple question. This relates to United States veterans only.
Oh,
That
yes,
is correct.
Definitely. That's correct. Yes. United States veterans.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Hi, this is Community Board 17. Would this be a board? What involvement would the board members be expected to have here?
Well, we would like to have the board members present veterans information through the newsletter or have announcements made at the community board meetings.
Yeah, I just wanted to
involve.
Okay.
Yes,
You finished, Christopher?
Yes, no.
All right.
I was saying,
go ahead.
Community Board 17. I was at we will, if we can form a would provide information within your newsletter and announcements during your community board meetings, so that, you know, I'm sure everyone in Brooklyn knows a veteran, a family of a veteran, and the community boards, we believe that having a veterans information provided at the monthly meetings would help reach more veterans so they can be better served.
Okay, I believe Community Board 3 has a comment.
Yeah, just briefly, Community Board 3 did start a Veterans Committee about 3 years ago. And we actually had a joint Veterans Parade with, trying to remember, the Brownsville Board. Which board is that,
Community Board
Chris?
16.
Was
Community Board
16
16.
last. Right.
Yes.
So we have an active Veterans Committee, and it's working, and we're getting information out.
Thank you.
I wanted to expand on that a little bit. 1 second. I want to expand that what Mr. Flacco said. We did a community board 3 and 16. We collaborated and did the Veterans Parade last year. This year we are
You're breaking
working
up.
with community
I'm
boards 1
sorry.
and 4. We're working with community 1 and 4 to do a virtual veteran resource fair this year, and that's going to be on November the 7th. You can contact Mr. Flacco and Mr. And Dr. Cleopatra Brown of Community Board 16. With the collaboration with Community Board 16, have seen legislation being enacted or improved and introduced to the City Council to help Cold War veterans with the property tax relief for New York City. Those are veterans served in non-disclosed theaters of conflict. So that's the Cold War veteran.
Thank you. And Community Board 8 says the one. Yep. Community Board 8 would like to thank you guys for the information. You don't have any comments? No. Okay. So I don't see any more. And wonderful. So in the chat is Mr. James and Mr. Lett's contact information and email. And there was a request from Community Board 16 for us to share a PowerPoint presentation, which I'll email that out to. That's fine, right, Mr. James? And a copy of the PowerPoint presentation to the members? Okay, wonderful.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I have a question.
Your name and board?
David Alexander, Community Board 16.
Thank you.
I've typed this in. You can't see what I typed in? That's
No, I don't. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, because I said I have a comment.
Oh, I did.
What I think, Mr. Lett, with regard to trying to get this off the ground, is to meet with the individual community boards at their veteran meetings, those that are already set up, like Community Board 3, Community Board 16. If we can meet with you and define what it is that you're trying to do so that we can help you get this done better. So like Christopher said, call Cleopatra, Dr. Cleopatra Brown, and we can set up a virtual meeting and you could give the committee a overview of what it is that you want to do.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And before we move forward, I am just going to check to see do any of our callers on the line, on the phone, just unmute. Do you guys have any questions or comments regarding the presentations? You can always press *6 to unmute. Okay. All right. So if there are no.
Hello?
Yes.
Good evening.
Yes,
Good evening.
Hi, we're representing the Morris Science Temple of America, Temple 30, subordinate Temple 34 in Brooklyn, New York. My name is Sister L. Berry Bay, and my husband also here to support Brother T. Berry Bay. And I want to say good evening to all.
All right.
Peace and love.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. All right.
Yes.
Any final words from our presenters before we move on?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Hello.
Wonderful.
Yes. I would like to say that
Yes.
yeah, the contact information organization task force is available at the flyer and the PowerPoint. You'll be sending that out to all the community boards, right?
Yes, and it's also in the chat as well. All right. Once again, with that concludes our business with the Veterans Action Group, Buffalo Soldiers of America.org. This is the second item on the agenda. We'd like to thank them for coming out and speaking on creating a Veterans Committee at the Community Board. Before we move on to our second presenters for the evening, we'd like to see if we could have a quorum and get a roll call. As you guys know, we have minutes from the past few minutes. We've been short, probably by either 1 or 2 votes. So hopefully tonight's a lucky night. We are going to be going over for minutes from June, September, and October. I was aware of one correction, which a board member will bring to our attention. So with that being said, I am going to have Karen. Let me just make sure. Let me sub Karen. And thank you for bearing me. Power of technology. Karen. Let me just search you. And if our second presenters could get ready in the meantime, I'll give you privileges to share your screen. Karen, there we go, Karen. Okay. Karen. So the way we are going to, we'll do a similar like in months past. We are going to, I'm gonna have Karen call the roll. I am going to ask everyone, well, last time we tried to unmute everyone, but if you hear your name, please unmute. We did kind of flag everyone while they were coming in, try to get a better estimate of who we can. But first we'll go through who is on video, and then we'll do everyone that's on via phone, okay? So let me Karen?
Yes.
Okay, so Karen, 1 second. I'm trying to pull everybody up. I was doing the switch. Okay, there we go. And let me close it down. All right, and with that, I'm gonna have you can start, you can call the roll. I'm ready.
Okay. Councilmember Barron's office.
And Councilmember Barron's office.
I thought I saw Joy earlier.
I did see Joy earlier. Joy?
Mm-hmm.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, present.
Okay. Councilmember Brannon. Councilmember Cornegie.
Hi, this is Ian from Councilmember Cornegie's office, present.
Thank you. Councilmember Crumbo. Councilmember Deutsch. Councilmember Eugene. Councilmember Lander. Councilmember Levin. Councilmember Lewis.
Hold on, I do see.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Karen, hold on. Are you guys able to unmute and mute yourselves, or to our members? Okay, yes. You're able to, okay. All right, you can continue, Karen, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Lewis. I see her. Oh, there you go. Christia? Hello? Okay. Councilmember Mydell. Councilmember Menchaca. Councilmember Reynoso. Councilmember Traeger. And Councilmember Yeager. Okay. Community Board 1.
Present.
Community Board 2. Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry about that. Councilmember MP Samuel.
Look at Kim waving.
Sorry.
And me, Karen, and me.
Sorry. Okay, I'm
Board
sorry.
President's office present.
Yes, Board President. So I have Community Board 1 present, Community Board 2, Community Board 3.
Richard Flateau, present.
Thank you. Community Board 4. Community Board 5. Community Board 6.
Present.
6. Who said that? Oh, Angelica?
Angelica. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angelica.
You're welcome.
Community Board 7.
Julia Pena, CB7, present.
Thank you. Community Board 8.
Ethel Tyus, present.
Thank you. Community Board 9. Community Board 10. Community Board 11. Community Board 12. Community Board 13.
Eddie Mark, present.
Thank you. Community Board 14.
Bill Smith, present.
Community Board 15.
Teresa Scavo, present.
Thank you. Community Board 16.
David Alexander, in for Janice Morgan, present.
Thank you. Community Board 17.
Joan Alexander Bakredin, Community Board 17.
Thank you. Community Board 18.
Violine Wilberti and for Gotti Bazella, Community Board 18.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
11. Okay.
We have about 16 people, so we should representatives.
Representative, okay. So let me just, we don't have anyone from CB4, 5.
Yes, we do. You have CB4.
CB4?
Yeah, CB4 is Joshua Brown and for Robert Camacho.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, 4. 5. Community Board 5. Anybody represent Community Board 9? Community Board 10? No. 10? 11? 12? Okay. All right, Karen, that's the community board. And then any council office. Let me see. Do I have any, I think we have a new number in the chat. Let me just check and see who's there. We have a new caller number. Is anyone on the line from an office representing, calling in by phone? From a community board or a council member office? Okay. That's it. So it seems that at the moment, we do not, we can't make a motion to accept the minutes from June 2nd, September the 9th, or October the 6th. Requiring 18 members of the board to be present for that to occur. So next month, unless anyone jumps on between now and the end of the meeting, we will have to do the approval for about for June, September, October, and November. So with that being said, we're going to monitor participation. If there's anyone else that's joining us, we'll try to see if we could get a quorum before the end of the meeting. But with that being said, we'd like to move on to our third item on the agenda. So we have a presentation from the New York City Planning and Zoning for Coastal Flood Resistance. So representatives from the Department of City Planning are here tonight to present their intent for permanent for special zone regulations that apply to the floodplains as part of a strategy to reduce flood risk and achieve resiliency through long-term adaptive planning. The initial term was adapted as a temporary emergency basis and needs to be permanent to ensure zone flexibility to promote resilient design. Through ongoing collaboration, business owners, residents who live and work in the floodplain, city planning have identified 6 areas where the parts of a temporary zoning could be improved. The proposed zoning text amendment being presented tonight. We have a representative from the Department of City Planning. I'm going to have them introduce themselves, Manuela and Catherine Richards. I'm going to set them up. They're going to introduce themselves, their title, the role with the organization, and then after that, they'll be available to take questions from the board, okay? Thank you, guys. Let's see. So I think we have, let me make sure. And we also have our Director of Land Use, Richard Barrick, on the line too as well. So let me, Manuela. Oh, there we go. Emmanuel, you are muted, and I am going to give you percentages. Okay, so you should be able to share your screen.
Perfect.
Wonderful. And then I am going to, you can introduce yourself in the meantime and your title, and I will get Catherine up on. Oh.
Trying to see if anyone can see my screen. Not sure that this worked.
I see it.
Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, great. Okay. All right. So my name is Manuela Povidaico. I work in the New York City Planning Department as a senior planner in the zoning division, and I've been managing this project, Zoning for Coastal Flood Resiliency. It's been—
I apologize for interrupting. Is it possible for you to make the screen to go into presentation mode?
Oh, yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
Is it working?
That's great. Thank you.
Fantastic. And yeah, we're very excited to present this today to all of you. We've been working on this since Hurricane Sandy. It's been a lot of work, a lot of outreach to communities, and we're finally moving forward. So I'll let my colleague Kate also introduce herself.
Hello. Just second what Manuela said, really happy to be here to talk to you tonight. And some of you have already scheduled or are scheduling times for us to come and present to your community boards and to your committees. We really appreciate that time and are looking forward to that also. So we are going to get started. Could you move to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so there are a lot of sources of flooding that can pose issues in New York City, but coastal storms are one of the most significant in terms of human safety, property damage, and business disruption. With 520 miles of coastline, New York City is very much a coastal city. When we analyze flood risk, we tend to focus on the area that FEMA designates as the high risk zone. And this is the area that has a 1% chance of flooding every year. About 165,000 Brooklyn residents live here. However, during Hurricane Sandy, we saw that doesn't necessarily represent who could be flooded in a real storm event. About half of the properties that are classified as being at a moderate risk of flooding were inundated during Sandy, and about another 320,000 Brooklynites live here. With climate change, we expect that the floodplain will continue to expand. By the 2050s, today's moderate risk zone will likely be the high risk zone for flooding. So to address the wide range of challenges that come with flood risk adaptation, the city is pursuing a strategy that involves multiple lines of defense. And the city's work includes coastal defense strategies, protection of our inland infrastructure, such as drainage and transit, and emergency preparedness. Today, with zoning for coastal flood resiliency, we're focusing on one tool in the toolkit, which is zoning, and using zoning to make our building stock in the city more resilient. So with these changes, we're hoping to reduce damage from future storms, to be more resilient in the long term by accounting for climate change and an expanded floodplain, and to possibly reduce the costs of flood insurance. And there are some rules that could also be applied in emergencies such as Hurricane Sandy, or even during a situation like we're experiencing right now with COVID-19. The regulations that govern flood-resistant construction are in Appendix G of the New York City Building Code. And these regulations have to be followed for new buildings constructed in that 1% annual chance flood zone, and for existing buildings that are significantly modified. After Hurricane Sandy, many buildings were severely damaged and had to be brought into compliance with these standards. But in doing so, this actually revealed many zoning obstacles. So to address these obstacles, like Serrana mentioned, there were 2 emergency temporary zoning changes put into place in 2013 and 2015. And zoning for coastal flood resiliency looks to make some of these temporary rules permanent, but also to improve on others. And the improvements to these temporary zoning provisions were developed through an extensive outreach process. And DCP started public engagement and outreach as soon as we could after Hurricane Sandy, including several neighborhood and citywide studies. And this outreach was really key in identifying additional ways that the zoning rules could be improved. We talked to more than 2,500 stakeholders in all 5 boroughs using different forms of public engagement, from detailed presentations about our research to community workshops and public events. And I think probably many people here have been involved either in your roles with the community board or as residents of Brooklyn, and we really can't overstate how valuable your feedback and all of this input has been. And the workshops were crucial to helping to identify priorities of the community and of individuals when making buildings resilient to coastal storms. So the goal there was twofold. First, to educate communities on flood risk and the various regulations that apply in the flood zone. And second, to learn from the community how our zoning rules could be improved to be more helpful. So all this very heavily shaped our final proposal, and Manuela is now going to take you through that proposal and its main goals.
Thanks, Kate. So let me see. Okay. So after we conducted the outreach on several neighborhoods across the city's floodplain, there were 4 overarching goals that came out of that discussion and feedback. But basically, the first one is really that we understood and heard from floodplain communities that they want to be able to prepare their buildings for flooding, even if they're not located in what FEMA determines to be the current high-risk flood zone. Especially as Kate was mentioning, those that are in areas that face moderate risk of flooding today, they did experience flooding from Sandy already, and therefore they really want the option to make their buildings safer and flood resilient. The second item is really people want the option to raise their occupiable space a little bit higher than the current flood level that FEMA projects. And again, this is because they've seen higher flood elevations during the storm, and they expect the risks really to grow in the future with climate change and sea levels rising. When people are undertaking improvements, to comply with Appendix G of the building code, they really want to do that once. And so it's important to consider the lifespan of a building, which in New York City can last for many decades, and make sure that we are considering the risk that we face today, but also the risk that we face in the future. And speaking about making buildings fully compliant with Appendix G of the building code, it can be hard to do that all at once. And so what we heard from communities is that they won't be able to take incremental steps towards resiliency, such as by elevating the mechanical equipment and other important key features and spaces of their buildings, either where they work or they live. And this is important to note that when you can conduct incremental steps towards resiliency, it's really when it can become more affordable because you're taking one incremental step at a time. And so our regulations, they really need to enable and facilitate that aspect of resilient improvements. And then last, after undertaking the 2 zoning text amendments on an emergency basis that Kate was mentioning, we know that the city really needs to be nimbler in responding to future crises and other types of disasters, not just the ones that lead to physical damage, such as Hurricane Sandy, but the one that we are experiencing right now with the pandemic. So I'll go through each one of these goals and the set of regulations and goals that we have within each one of them to make sure that we can have a future New York City that's more resilient. So I'll start with goal number 1 that really speaks to the applicability of the text. It's important to know here that when we are talking about zoning changes in the floodplain, we're not talking about any mandatory regulations that we're adding. It's really a set of regulations that are to offer optional flexibility for anyone that's undertaking any resilient improvement in their structures to really, make sure that they are not facing any boundaries within our code and that they really can make their buildings safer with time. And so the first thing is really about where these optional regulations apply. Right now, the regulations apply to buildings that are currently in the high-risk flood zone, in the current defined high-risk flood zone. Because we expect this floodplain and the high-risk flood zone to increase over time with climate change, we would be offering these optional regulations also for any property that's located in the current moderate risk flood zone. So a little bit beyond. You can really notice that change in the south of Brooklyn, which, it's an area that really got damaged by Sandy. As Kate was mentioning, we had almost 50% of the lots in those areas that were flooded, but they don't yet have this optional flexibility in zoning. So it's really important to consider that now moving forward. And the next set of regulations, they really speak to climate risk and sea level rise projections, not just on a geographic basis, I was alluding to before, but also with the height of the expected flow level for each property itself. And so I have the provision separated into these 5 different categories that I'm going to go over. So the first one is regarding building envelope. This set of regulations would allow building owners to physically elevate habitable spaces and other building support features above the expected flow elevations by offering more flexibility with our bulk regulations. So examples of that are height, yards, and floor area regulations. So buildings can be made resilient without putting homeowners in a hard spot of potentially having to choose between keeping their whole building versus making their their homes more resilient. And this is really something we heard a lot when we were speaking with residents in these communities. Our regulations right now, they are helping, but they're not enough to make sure that everyone can be made whole and safer. So the next one is regarding ground floor regulations. The other item that we really heard when we were speaking with communities is that, especially in our commercial corridors, we really want to make sure that we can continue to have buildings that are safe, but also that they really meet the context where they are, and that they're inviting, and that they are at grade, and that they provide ADA access and active uses as close to the sidewalk as possible. And so the set of regulations here, they provide ways in which the building can exempt spaces from floor area calculations if they are making all those active uses close to the sidewalk, close to where people are walking, to ensure that these communities can continue to be vibrant. The next slide talks about streetscape regulations. In a similar fashion regarding how this building look, we really want to make sure that we are facilitating and enabling buildings that are resilient, but also look good. And so there are two ways that we want to accomplish that. One of them is to incentivize, as I was mentioning before, access to be kept close to the sidewalk level. And so the set of regulations will be basically requiring any building that's using our optional rules to meet streetscape requirements that encourage access to be at grade and internal, and also encourage any potential blank walls that elevated buildings could potentially have, and instead mitigate that with planters or any active uses such as tables and chairs if you're in a commercial corridor, to make sure that we can still have this connection between the building and where people are walking. The next slide speak about special conditions that we have across the city's floodplain. There are many communities that have been there for a very long time, and they were built, a lot of the building stock we have was built way before zoning was put in place in the city, especially our 1961 zoning resolution, which basically contains most of the regulations that we still see today. And these buildings, they often do not comply with our bulk regulations, so height, floor area, yards, or they may not comply with the minimum lot sizes that we require today, or they may not conform with our use regulations. And these buildings, we have a lot of communities living in these structures, and they really need more flexibility for these buildings to also be retrofitted. And so this proposal also would include all the necessary flexibility with height and floor area and yards, especially for buildings that are located in small lots, to really make sure that buildings meet the context and at the same time that they are made resilient, like you can see here in the slide with these elevated homes. The last slide on goal number 2 is about discretionary actions. So we understand the city's floodplain is really, really big. We have almost 800,000 residents in today's floodplain, and we have so many types of buildings and types of lot configurations. And so one of the things that we will continue to have in this proposal, which we already have today in the book, is to be able to offer a discretionary pathway in case our rules that are available on as of right basis are not helpful enough, just in case there are situations in which people need more flexibility. So this will be through the BSA special permit that we already have. So we would just make sure that that BSA special permit offers the flexibility that's necessary for all different types of communities to retrofit. Like the one you can see here on the slide, it's a community in Queens that has a lot of buildings in one zoning lot, and they could really face a lot of hindrances in our zoning code if we don't make more flexibility. So starting with goal number 3. This goal is, I was speaking about it before, but the provisions that I was speaking until this moment, they are offered for buildings that will fully comply with Appendix G of the Building Code. Anything under goal 3 is really the set of provisions that will allow the incremental steps towards resiliency. So buildings wouldn't have to fully meet Appendix G of the Building Code in order to take advantage of this flexibility in the zoning resolution. So starting with mechanical equipment, we learned that raising mechanical equipment is often the first step to make buildings more resilient. And so the proposal would enable more options for the placement of mechanical equipment above the flood level, either atop of roofs, which is a common strategy for larger buildings, as you can see here in the picture, or in a separate structure, which you can also see here, this gray structure, which is a common strategy for large sites, especially residential campuses, as we've been seeing them retrofitting after Hurricane Sandy. Also, with smaller buildings, they often cannot accommodate the additional load of mechanical equipment on the roof or something like that, or even within the building. And so we will allow this equipment to be considered permitted obstruction on yards and open space, just to make sure that people can raise those equipment that are often located in cellars, spaces below grade that are very vulnerable, to really be placed above the expected flood elevation. And then moving towards a little bit on our commercial buildings and industrial buildings, a big portion of the floodplain contain businesses that offer either neighborhood services, which are really key after disaster hits, or that are part of the large industrial economy of the city. So many of these buildings and businesses, they really have a hard time in be completely elevated, especially because they depend on being a grade for operations a lot, or even dry flood proof, which is when you don't allow the water to come in the structure, because it may be very costly to do that, especially for when you have really big footprints. And so what we heard is that businesses often have to prioritize what kind of spaces they want to raise above harm's way in a way that space that is safe from flooding can actually offer the necessary support immediately after the storm, so businesses can come back and work kind of quicker after a disaster happens. So aside from having regulations that will assist with that, the proposal would also enable different types of flood protection measures to be implemented across all areas in the floodplain. So this would include allowances such as flood panels to be deployed. As you can see here in the picture, we are demonstrating a footing that is installed and it's permanent, but then in advance of a storm, you will have to add the flood panels and deploy them before and then remove them soon after the storm. So that's the sort of strategies that we'll be facilitating. And also landscape berms is something that we currently don't have as a permitted obstruction on open spaces, which we will be allowing moving forward, and any associated egress systems that will come with that. It would also allow spaces used for the storage of flood panels to be exempted from flood area to really enable on-site storage. There are several buildings that are already built out to their maximum floor area, and so it's really key that we allow this exemption, just so we are not forcing anyone to have it to, have a deal with another site outside of their properties to storage these flood panels, which is sometimes hard to find space. And so the floor area is something we want to move out of the way. And then the last slide on goal 3 is regarding waterfront development. So in many areas of the city, zoning requires waterfront sites to provide waterfront access. And even in a wider range of that, there are many sites that are very close to the water that we require waterfront yards or visual corridors. And our current rules, they don't allow waterfront yards or visual corridors to be raised. And this can be an issue if you want to make sure that your property is safe from flooding. And so the proposal will continue to offer flexibility for grading to occur, but also facilitate other measures such as designing of soft shorelines, which we've heard a lot. It's a really good strategy to tackle sea level rise and make sure that we remove any hindrances in our waterfront rules to achieve that. So I'm getting to the end. I know it's a lot of information. So we'll definitely take any questions you have and clarifications, but starting with goal 4, and I'll go quicker through it. This goal is a little bit different than the other ones that we presented because the set of regulations wouldn't apply solely to the floodplain, but on a citywide level. And so with this project, we will be going to all community boards in Brooklyn and in the other boroughs as well, since these provisions are really trying to facilitate future storm recovery and making sure that we are prepared right now if that comes. So Starting with power systems, the storm, Hurricane Sandy and other storms that we've seen across the country, including the recent tropical storm Isaias, has left many customers without energy for days, if not weeks. And usually that doesn't really follow a floodplain boundary. And so being able to provide backup energy is really crucial for the city as a whole. So the proposal will allow power systems, including generators, solar energy systems, fuel cells, batteries, any other energy storage systems, to be considered permitted obstruction on open areas across all zoning districts to facilitate their installment. And in addition to that, we want to ensure that all areas of the city can easily provide ADA access, considering that more and more buildings will need to adapt to climate change and may even opt to do it right now and incorporate resilient designs. So the proposal would provide full consistency across the city for building access by classifying both ramps and lifts as permitted obstruction in all required open areas. Now, another important issue to discuss is how disasters, especially those that require the evacuation of residents, can impact vulnerable populations. Hurricane Sandy and again, other storms that we've seen in the past years, especially years of 2017-18, was really active on a countrywide perspective. They really showed how the storms, they exposed the difficulties that nursing home residents face, especially if they're in areas at high risk of flooding that can be inundated on a more frequent basis. So nursing homes, they are licensed to house populations that require continual medical care. But research shows that this dependency can be strained whether the nursing homes shelter in place or if people evacuate before a coastal storm event. And so while all nursing homes in the city's hurricane evacuation zones could be subject to mandatory evacuations during a declared emergency, the city believes it would be appropriate to limit the growth of nursing homes in high-risk areas today to really lessen the health impacts that logistical challenges that could be posed in the case we do have a future storm. So the proposal would prohibit the development of new nursing homes and restrict the enlargement of existing facilities within the high-risk floodplain and other selected geographies that likely could have limited vehicular access because of the storm event. One example of that is, islands located off the mainland. So the existing facilities, though, they will still be able to conduct enlargements so they can continue to do modest improvements and including those that help with resiliency. And then the last slide that I have is regarding future disaster recovery, and that would actually include some provisions to help with the pandemic right now. So Sandy showed us that a lengthy process to update zoning regulations can really present obstacles to the necessarily fast-paced disaster response. So the proposal would include rules that could be made available to facilitate the recovery process from future disasters, some of which could actually be implemented now to address COVID-19 and its associated economic effects. An example of that is that we will be triggering is to give more time for non-conforming uses, such as a retail establishment in a residence district, to come back to business, because our underlying regulations in the zoning resolution, they typically require this non-conforming uses that are discontinued for more than 2 years to just come back as a conforming use. So if you have a business in a residential area, if you don't open up within 2 years, you have to come back as a residential use or community facility use. So that can be very hard, especially with the economic situation we are right now. So considering the challenges that we face, this project is also proposing to add an additional 2 years for businesses to come back, so a total of 4. Aside from that, we will also be offering more time for anyone that has a City Planning Commission special permit or authorization to complete their plans in case they weren't able to start construction in the midst of this situation. So they can have another 3 years to come back to City Planning Commission and complete their plans. So that's it for me. So the citywide zoning text is being referred out. It happened on October 19th, and it went to all 59 community boards in the citywide level, borough boards and borough presidents for 60 days. So the deadline for us to receive recommendations is December 28th. Thank you so much. We'll take questions.
Thank you. So Richard Barrett, Director of Land Use couple of questions. I'm going to get him on, and then we're going to open up to
I think I'm on.
floor. You're on, wonderful. And we have reached a number for quorum, so we'll take it after this presentation.
So for adapting existing homes, though there would be a significant savings for the federal flood insurance that might result to offset the monthly cost of taking out a construction loan to make these improvements, many affected property owners would still have trouble affording such additional payments on top of their existing mortgage payment. So what consideration has been given by the administration to offset these costs, such as something the Borough Board has called for a few different times through the years, real estate tax offsets?
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, so I mean, this is still something that we have to work on as a city and see if we can find more financial assistance for homeowners to take this. One of the things that I mentioned that we really took very seriously was to make sure that we can remove zoning out of the way, especially for the partial resiliency retrofits. So at least, you know, the small steps could be undertook in case that's something that property owners can do right now. But the city is still advocating for financial assistance moving forward.
Right, because except for fairly affluent folks, you know, this is a gift that doesn't really help, and they're going to get hit with the insurance books if they don't do this. So, you know, it's an interesting problem that we're going to have for many homeowners. Given the limited number of major alterations that have met flood resistance standards, what incentives might assist property owners requiring major alterations to now meet flood resistant standards?
Sorry, Richard, I had a problem here with the sound. Can you repeat your question?
Sure. Given to date the limited number of major alterations that have met flood resistant standards, what incentives might assist property owners requiring major alterations to meet the flood resistant standards?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, the incentives that we are adding as part of the project is really to, if someone is undertaking that substantial improvement, that they incorporate sea level rise projections when raising buildings and adapting buildings. And so the incentives will be height flexibility. So that could be achieved without, you know, people having to chop or not to develop a portion of what they could with our floor area regulations. So height, flexibility, floor area. So any space that's being wet flow proofed, which is when you allow the water to flow through the structure, that space can only be used for parking, storage, or access for building code. So we will also be allowing that space to be exempted from floor area calculations to make sure you can have a wet flow proof base and then, you know, the building on top without losing development rights or any square footage. And so those are like two main examples for commercial corridors. We have a dry flow proofing floor area exemption to incentivize active uses to be kept to the close to the sidewalk level. So it's the first 30 feet from the street wall could be exempted if the establishment is dry flow proofed, so watertight, pursuant to building code. So those are some of the examples that we have, but we have a PowerPoint that has every single provision, and anything within Goal 2 is the types of provisions that we are adding to kind of incentivize buildings to be flood-proof today, but also in the future.
Thank you. And last question, while zoning is part of the solution, there's been promising of protective flood barriers, and which are equally important. So what is the status of the Red Hook temporary flood protection put forth as part of the resilient Red Hook meetings towards addressing the western part of Red Hook on Buttermilk Channel up to Hamilton Avenue?
I don't have information about that. I'm wondering if my Brooklyn colleagues.
Hi, Richard. This is Kate. The last that we've heard and our borough planner for Community District 6 has heard was that was caused due to COVID. And we don't unfortunately have a sense of timeline or any major updates.
So I would just be prepared when you're out with Community Board 6 that this may come up again.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, Sarana, you want to take it?
With that being said, I'll open up the floor to questions from the board members.
Sarana, Teresa Scavo, Community Board 6. In your presentation, you mentioned taking it slightly outside the flood area. How far outside the area would you be going?
This is for the floodplain regulations, right? The question?
Yes.
Yeah, you could put the map up you had from the beginning that showed the 2% area.
So let me go to the map. All right, so I don't know if this is better or the other one. Let's use this one. So if you can see the map on
you showed a picture with a line going through it, that this was the floodplain. How far out beyond that would you allow this to go on?
I see. So this picture is just for illustrative purposes. This is actually in the Rockaways. So I will just go to the map, but basically the area on the far left in blue is the current high risk flood zone. So we will be extending the flexibility to the area in green as well, the moderate risk flood zone. So in the south part of Brooklyn, you can see how that goes further inland.
You go to presentation mode, it will help see the scale.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Do you have any idea, is that 1 block, 2 blocks further?
Let me open another platform here. Let me see.
While it's getting that up.
I suggest when you go to the community board presentations for those parts of Brooklyn that you have a more detail, like a blow up, that will really enlarge the scale.
We have mapped how these different provisions apply in each community board, so we'll be able to show those. But it really depends on where you are, how far that more moderate risk flood zone, how much farther inland that goes. But we have more detailed maps that we can show.
Thank you.
This tool here is very helpful. The flood hazard mapper that's available online for anyone. You can see, like Kate was mentioning, sometimes it's are 2 blocks, sometimes several blocks. So you can actually navigate and take a look at that. But we can also share more maps if needed.
Any other questions from the chat?
Yes, Eddie Mark from Community Board 13, representing Coney Island and Brighton Beach. You mentioned about not building any more nursing home, which I understand because, it would be harder for them to get out. But what about senior housing? Is that exempted too, or is that okay?
Senior housing, we are not restricting the development. It's really the nursing homes because by law, nursing homes, they are really defined by the state as providing continual medical care. So because of that reliance, we really felt that it can be very challenging to either evacuate residents or if people shelter in place, it can be very hard to actually get a permit from the state. So it's a very complicated situation regarding these populations when there is a coastal storm. So all the other types of uses, senior housing, anything like that, we are not changing anything about that.
So assisted living would be okay, I guess.
Assisted living facilities, okay. Yes. So I think that for continuing care retirement communities, there are portions of it that sometimes are defined as nursing homes. So that would also be restricted, but not the part for just residents to live, people that don't rely on medical equipment.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Community Board 3, they want to know how the structure how many structures will be affected by the new zoning?
In Brooklyn, Kate, do we have the stats for Brooklyn easy?
So
we can provide that information.
Set them up in just a second.
I just have the number on the citywide. I think it's 125,000 buildings in the two floodplains combined.
Okay. Any other questions from members?
Another question. So this is mandatory or voluntary?
Voluntary.
Okay. All right. That's all I need to know. Thanks.
No problem.
I have a question. Does this apply to supportive housing?
So the regulations would be available for supportive housing. So any supportive housing, either existing or new construction, will be able to take advantage of the rules to make the buildings resilient. We're not doing any restrictions on construction or anything like that.
To answer the building question really quick, about 84,000 buildings in Brooklyn. And that's in both the 1% annual chance, that higher risk flood zone, and the 0.2% annual chance moderate risk flood zone.
I have a question. This is Angelica from Community Board 6. I'm wondering if the zoning, do you see this conflicting with any of the new local laws, 92, 94, where you have a lot of activity on the rooftop that's required, and it makes it difficult to elevate other mechanical equipment? Do you see any conflicts happening there?
That's a great question. So I think that with I would think more about the power system regulations. So let me go to that slide. So because of that, I mean, those laws will be requiring either green roofs or solar, right? So yeah, so I think that this provision here with power systems is just adding more flexibility. So in case, let's say you have to do the green roof, you may need other space on the property to incorporate backup energy. And so I think this is kind of working in tandem with that, because it's providing the flexibility for permitted obstructions on open areas. So then you can actually find space on the property for a generator or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay. I'm just checking the chat for any questions in the chat, and let me see if we have any questions from anyone on the phone that's calling in. All right. Going once, going twice. I don't think that we have any more questions. Do we have any closing remarks from our presenters?
I just want to add that when the presentation goes for districts 15 and 11, talking about the BSA special permit and the nuance with cottage rules versus standard rules when those presentations are made.
Yes, thanks, Richard. And we'll have those maps for those community boards, like we mentioned earlier, about how those rules apply.
I have a question. This is Ethel Tias with CBA.
Yes, yes, CBA.
Yes, I have a question regarding using power system generators and backup batteries that relate to solar panels. Does the anticipated change to the zoning rules tie back to fire department permissions for generators and backup batteries for solar systems?
That's a great question. Yeah, one of the things that I heard is that those regulations, they require a lot of this equipment to be unenclosed. So this provisions that we are setting, they will make sure that that's allowed. Only for really large pieces of generators that we had to make sure that we require them to be enclosed because of environmental review issues and air quality. Some generators are not very environmental friendly. And so those, really need to make sure that they're enclosed so they don't pose any issues with air quality. But everything else that I heard from the regulations that they have to be unenclosed will be allowed.
Thank you.
No problem. And another question regarding how Community Board 18 and how it's going to affect the residents of Canarsie. In Canarsie?
How it's going to affect the what in Canarsie? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Residents, the
will
Canarsie
help.
residents.
Do you want me to reply, Kate? So the Canarsie report was actually crucial for us to understand what are the issues for especially attached buildings to undertake retrofits and resilience improvements. So it built a lot of our framework that we presented today. As an example, the one thing that we heard a lot is that many homes that have units, below grade, or have that situation, you have, the car parked below grade. If you want to make the building fully comply with Appendix G of the building code, the spaces below grade have to be filled up. And often the way the zoning allowances with height in yards worked, it didn't allow the space to be relocated on top of the structure. We saw some row houses in Coney Island that were able to do that because they have a really large or a residence district that allows for larger buildings, and so they had the space in the floor area. But Canarsie, because especially the contextual districts, they are very tight. So we are actually having a full set of regulations in our proposed section 6460 that are really trying to help those buildings to relocate any spaces from below grade to above the structure, above the floor level. So they are resilient.
And I believe we have a final question from Ethan Smith.
Greetings. I was just typing it up. In terms of the external placement of equipment in a lot, we've seen zoning happen across the city where there's very few lots left. So then now for whatever remaining construction that's going to happen, does that mean that there'll be based off of the design, that there's going to be a limit to the footprint of the building should, as a requirement, that you have to limit, you can allow for this equipment? And also, is there a restriction as to where on the premises that equipment can be placed?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. So with the mechanical equipment allowances as permitted obstruction, we are not putting a lot of restrictions on the size of them, except for when it's being placed on open space. We're limiting to 25% of the required open space. So it's not that it's whatever you have is open, but it's whatever zoning requires to be open space. You will be able to fill up with a mechanical building structure 25% of that. So that's one restriction in terms of size. However, we do have a restriction in terms of height of the mechanical equipment, just so we don't have anything that's crazy and huge in properties. So we added restriction based on the zoning district. So it's either 10 feet, 15 or 23 above the reference plane, which is the allowance for where the mechanical equipment is placed. So it can be up to 10 feet above grade, and then 10 feet above that for low density residential, to make sure that we have a high cap. And then it cannot be too close from property lines. So it cannot be closer than 5 feet from property lines. Can be set back farther in, but you cannot go that close, especially because of regulations we have regarding fire and potential for that. So we want to make sure that's safe. Let's see if there are other regulations that I'm forgetting. No, I think that was it. The height, the maximum percentage in the distance between lot lines.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Manuela. Thank you, Ms. Richards from City Planning. I see Winston on the line too as well. Hello. I don't think we have any more questions regarding this presentation. So with that being said, we're going to ask the Borough Board will be asked to take a position on this matter and conduct this hearing on this item in January 2021. As the zoning text has been officially referred to the affected community boards, which Derek noted, we urge community boards representatives to coordinate directly for next steps. That being said, that concludes our business with the Department of City Planning on zoning and coastal flood resiliency. Do we know the questions regarding this regarding this presentation? All right, wonderful. So thank you guys for coming out. Just to make an announcement, we have been joined during the meeting. We're joined by Councilmember Machaca's office, Councilmember Joyce, and Councilmember Mizell. So we are officially able to adopt the minutes for this meeting. With that being said, I'd like to move on. We conclude our business planning. I'd like to go back to our first item on the agenda. We're going to try to do just one by one because each of them stand alone. So we'll start off with June. So I'm going to ask for the board to adopt the minutes from June the 2nd, right? Copies of the minutes were sent out to the members. Do we have any corrections to the minutes for June? For June 2nd. Is there a motion to accept the minutes for June?
Motion to accept the June 2nd minutes.
And Teresa Scavo second.
Okay, Richard and Teresa. All those, okay. So it's moved and it was second to adopt the minutes from June 2nd. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Aye. Right. So the minutes from June 2nd have been adopted. Now moving on, and I'm going to ask for the adopt the minutes from September the 9th. Copies of the minutes were sent out to the members. Do we have any corrections to the minutes for September the 9th?
Motion to approve the September minutes.
Motion to
Teresa Scavo second.
Thank you. So it has been moved and second to adopt the minutes from September 9th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Nay. So motion to adopt the minutes from September the 9th has been approved. Last of the minutes. From October, we're going to adopt the minutes from October the 6th Borough Board meeting, which was last month. Copies of these minutes were sent to all members. And that I do know, do we have any, do we have any corrections to the minutes? Gail?
Yes,
Yeah.
Gail Smith, CB 14. I was present for the meeting, so my name needs to be added.
Okay. So let the
Teresa
record
Scavo moves to adopt the minutes of October 6th.
with the corrections.
With corrections as noted.
David Alexander
Gail Smith,
second.
David Alexander second. Okay. Okay. So it has been moved and second with the corrections of the minutes from October the 6th be adopted. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. How many opposed? The minutes from October the 6th has been adopted. Wonderful. Yay. Well, we're not done with our meeting yet. Did we have any? We do have another presentation from our board members, and it's very important to the board. I want everyone to kind of stick around. So do we have any unfinished business? Right. So now we're going to go into new business. And with that said, I'm going to yield the floor to Richard Flacco from Community Board 3. His board has been working on a topic in regards to the Department of Building Services notices on local 152. He has a presentation that he'd like to bring to the board. So with that being said, I am going to allow him. Let's see.
This is David Alexander. I have another meeting to attend. And it begins at 7. They began at 7:30.
Okay. I'll make the notes if you can't stay for this presentation. But thank you for attending.
Not a problem. Okay, see you next month.
See you
Good
next
night,
month.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Mr. Plateau? Yep.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to try to run through this very quickly. I'm going to condense. We had an hour-and-a-half town hall meeting. I'm going to try to condense this into about 7 minutes. So the subject is local law 152. I'm glad that many of the council members or their representatives have joined us because this was a bill passed by the city council, and it's a real, has real pocketbook implications. So I'm going to just start, give a little context and overview. I'm going to go over how this law came about or why it came about. And I'm going to go over, there's a couple of other laws that came into play. The bill, Local Law 152, it came about because of a couple of explosions, which many of you probably remember. And then I'm going to tell you what some of the key impacts and takeaways are from this local law. And it has some major serious impacts. I've seen estimates by the Plumbing Foundation of the City of New York that this law is going to affect 198,000 buildings throughout the city, and it's going to have a massive impact, and yet it's virtually unknown by the public. I just learned about this bill maybe a few weeks ago. We were starting to get inquiries from people on the board and from community residents about solicitations from plumbers to do inspections, and that's how we first learned about this. Excuse me. So there's a lot of confusion about this bill. So let me just start with how this came about. So there was an explosion in East Harlem on March 12, 2014. Two buildings were affected, 1644 and 1646 Park Avenue near East 116th Street. There were 8 people killed, 70 injured, and 100 families were displaced. Then a little more than a year later, there was an explosion on the Lower East Side. The explosion took place at 121 2nd Avenue between East 7th Street and St. Mark's Place. There were 3 deaths, 19 people injured, and the fire that resulted completely destroyed 119, 121, and 123 2nd Avenue. So as a result of those 2 incidents, there were 3 laws that got put into place. So I'm going to mention the 3, and then I'm going to drill down on Local Law 152 just a little bit. So there was a New York State Public Service Commission case order number 15-G-0244, and that's requiring gas service line inspections. The inspections are fairly limited. They're from the point of entry of a building to a property meter. And in the case of that regulation, the compliance mandate falls on the utility company. So in Brooklyn, that mandate falls on National Grid. National Grid, in turn, subcontracted out those inspections to Precision Pipeline Solutions. So that's the private company that's being inspecting those gas lines and the meters. The second law was Local Law 30, and that required utility companies to install shutoff valves in the street to ensure that gas can be shut off by first responders in the event of an emergency. In that case, also, the mandate for compliance falls on the utility company. So in Brooklyn, that's National Grid. They subcontracted out that work for the valve installations to 3 companies: Allen Construction, Ellicnor Hawkeye, and Safeway Construction. So here's what I want to focus on, and that's Local Law 152 of 2016. It went into effect January 1st, 2020, even though it was passed in 2016. And gas piping systems in all buildings, except for buildings classified in occupancy group R3, must be inspected by a licensed master plumber. So the only exemptions, and I'll get into it a little bit more later, but the only exemptions are 1 and 2 families. So everybody else is going to be subject to this law, all other building owners. And very important point, unlike the first 2 laws, this compliance mandate falls on the property owner. And a bigger point, failure to file an inspection certification before the applicable due date may result in a civil penalty of $10,000. Okay, so I'm just going to run through a few questions that we had, and we actually had about an hour-and-a-half town hall. It was on relatively short notice. We had about 110 people that attended the virtual town hall, and we had the buildings department on because they're the agency that's going to be enforcing this. So what was the outreach? That's the first question. The outreach was abysmal. Their outreach consisted of putting the law notification in their newsletter on their website. So no one knows. That's why no one knows about this law. They did not send out any notices to the property owners. The exemption criteria, again, it said R3. That's a use group. It's not zoning. It's a use group. And R3 is basically a 1 or 2 family house. Now, the problem is in a lot of parts of Brooklyn, that buildings don't have a certificate of occupancy. So then the question is, how are they going to determine what's exempt? And it's a very murky area. I know in Community Board 3, a lot of the buildings were built prior to when C of Os were required. So if there's any doubt about your status, you're really going to have this inspection done by a licensed master plumber. The fine's going to be issued by the buildings department. Mixed-use buildings are not exempt. So if you have a 1 family and a store, you're not exempt. Can you get an extension? No. And this is where the elected officials come into play. We have to raise awareness with all the elected officials because this is going to be extremely detrimental to some very vulnerable populations, including senior citizens and also houses of worship. They're not aware of this law. Okay, who files a certification? The owner has to file a certification, but it has to be stamped by a licensed master plumber. Will the penalty accrue annually? Is it a one-time penalty? It does not accrue annually. However, you have to do it, the inspection, every 4 years. So if you don't do it in when it's due, and you don't do it 4 years from now, you end up with 2 $10,000 fines, the way the bill was written. Do you have to have an inspection if you don't have natural gas service? The answer is yes. You still have to have a licensed master plumber certify that you don't have natural gas, and you have to pay that person. And I'll get into the fees in a minute. How long do you have to keep records? 8 years. Must the plumber inspect natural gas piping on a roof or in a backyard? Yes. They do not have to, or they cannot go into a tenant space. So, so the next thing, I'm just gonna, because people are probably wondering, does this apply to me, to my community board? Because this is being rolled out by community board. So I'm gonna put up the actual service notice from the buildings department, and I'm gonna go to the second page because they have the rollout. So the December 31st, 2020 deadline is for community boards 1, 3, and 10 in all boroughs. So that's 15 community boards. So anybody in 1, 3, and 10, you really have to be aware of this and get the word out. And we have to put some heat on the elected officials about this because the notice was so abysmal. So that concludes my presentation. I want to just give a very quick overview, and I don't know if people have any questions or whatever. So,
Do you share the screen? Are you able to get it up or
how do I stop the share screen? Let me see if I can.
No, it's not
Okay.
true. We don't
Oh,
see
you
it.
didn't see anything?
No.
Oh, you didn't see anything?
No, we did not see anything. No.
Oh boy. Okay, so I didn't share the screen, but sorry
But
about
can we
that. I
email
thought.
I'll email it out to everyone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll email it out to everyone. You
I
have any-
apologize for that.
No problem. Thank you. I should have been paying attention. Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Sarana, could you just say what local law it was?
152.
Thank you.
Local law 152 of 2016.
And it seems that Community Board 1, they had the presentation at their board meeting last month regarding this local law.
This is Gail Smith. First of all, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. It's very, very important information. In reference, you specifically mentioned community boards 1, 3, and 10. Are those the only 3 community boards right now that's
Right
impacted
now,
by
yes.
this?
Let me see if I could just share that. Can you see anything?
Yes.
No.
Well, we don't see. We see you sharing the screen, but there we go.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So sorry, I wasn't sharing. I thought I was sharing the other stuff. So 1, 3, and 10, the deadline is December 31st, 2020. So unless the elected officials are able to do something, people are going to get hit over the head hard because there's very little awareness about this. So this would also include the houses of worship. And you can see the rollout here on this page.
And you'll be sharing that with us, right, Sarana?
Yeah. I sent a version of this to the Borough Board, to the Borough President's office. We also have Community Board 3. We put up a video. We did a 90-minute town hall. We have drilled down, went into a lot of detail, and went into a lot more questions with the buildings department. So I had the head of the plumbing division of the buildings department, and we went into a lot more detail on this. So that video is on Community Board 3's website. It's about 90 minutes.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Well, with that being said, I'd like to thank Richard Plateau. He reached out to us this week. It was something that was happening at his board. And once again, we encourage any board members, if there's something going on with your community board that you'd like to bring it to board, please do. We'll be happy to add it there in new business or unfinished business. So that's what we're here for. So with that being said, I'd like to thank Richard Plateau for his presentation on local law 152, correct?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes. Recently, the fiscal year 21 presentations by the different city agencies, DOB indicated that they'd be reducing the number of inspectors. So I'm wondering how that will be addressed by this near-term deadline for the end of this year.
So the important takeaway about this is that you have to get your own inspection from a licensed master plumber. So they're not doing the inspections. You have to pay for it. And one thing which I didn't mention was the cost. So the cost for the inspections, from what I'm hearing, if it's a 3 or 4 family house, the plumbers are charging between $600 to $1,000 for the inspection. And another thing, which I didn't get into the detail here, if they find some issue with your plumbing they have to write that up, and then you have to get that work done before they can certify things. So it's going to lead to other costs in addition to just paying for the licensed master plumber to do the inspection.
And just to point that when the plumber comes out, if they do find something wrong, the report that indicates something's wrong has to go to Department of Buildings so that you don't get the $10,000 fine. And then within 180 days, if you don't cure that condition, not quite clear what that fine would be for the second filing that you have to do. But obviously you'll have the cost of the plumber, and you got to get the same plumber that you had to do the initial filing to come back to do this. The issue for DOB that's not quite clear is the number of buildings that they have in the first phase. When they don't have documentation by December 31st, how quickly will some computer coding or clerical staff realize that we now have to send you a $10,000 fine? So not sure if the fines will go out on the 1st of January or over several months, but the fine is there and there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah, I think the way the bill was written, the only defense is that you had the inspection done, and maybe there was a glitch with getting the paperwork in. So there basically is no defense right now. You either get the inspection done and the initial paperwork filed by December 31st, or you end up with a $10,000 fine. It's pretty harsh.
I'd just like to mention, this is Ethel Tyus again. I'd just like to mention for the buildings that are larger than 2 families, the owner has the right to enter with notice to the tenant so that the gas lines to the various stoves in the building can also be inspected.
Okay, so that exact issue actually came up, and the guy in the buildings department emphasized very emphatically and clearly that under this bill, the licensed master plumber is not to go into the tenant space. So it could be some other inspection, but not under this local law. It's primarily for exposed natural gas piping in the basement, and then if you got equipment on a roof or a backyard, but they're not to go into the tenant space. Also, I could tell you another problem. A lot of people may have gas lines running through their common areas or hallways. That's going to result in another fine, probably separate from this $10,000 fine, because you're not supposed to have natural gas piping in the common areas.
Okay. Thank you. So with that being said, thank you for the presentation.
Sorry I wasn't sharing. I thought I was sharing the rest of the earlier part, but sorry about that.
No, the presentation was fine. And once they get the documents, I think everyone will be okay with it. So with that being said, that concludes. We thank Richard Plateau, Chairperson of Community Board 3, for presenting on Local Law 152. With that being said, our next meeting will be December the 8th at 6 p.m. During that meeting, hopefully we'll have Mitchell Lama back on the agenda, and also I believe that the presenter from the civil complaint review board probably will be on. Like, they present at our previous board meeting. I can't remember the name at the moment. With that being said, is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
L. Smith, CB 14, motion to adjourn.
Is there second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you on December the 8th, and I'll make sure I'll follow up with an email before the end of the week with the documents.
Take care.
Yes, thank you.
Good night.
Everyone, good
Good night, everyone. Okay. And Joan, congratulations, Ms. Rakazine. Welcome to Borough Board.
Thank you. You went away for a second. Yay! First meeting. I'm so excited. This is awesome.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Eddie, let's